The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
Listen now to a reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Glory to you, O Lord. When Jesus heard of the death of John the Baptist, he withdrew in a boat to a deserted place by himself. But the crowds heard of this and followed him on foot from their towns. When Jesus disembarked and saw the vast crowd, his heart was moved with pity for them, and he cured the sick. When it was evening, the disciples approached him and said, "This is a deserted place, and it is already late. Dismiss the crowds so that they can go to the villages and buy food for themselves." He said to them, "There is no need for them to go away. Give them some food yourselves." But they said to him, 5 loaves and 2 fish are all we have here." Then he said, "Bring them here to me." And he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he said the blessing, broke the loaves, and gave them to the disciples, who in turn gave them to the crowds. They all ate and were satisfied, and they picked up the fragments left over, 12 baskets full. Those who ate were about 5,000 men, not counting women and children. The Gospel of the Lord. We are, I suspect, quite aware that there are different kinds of hungers in the human spirit. We're probably most aware of the hunger of the stomach. But it is equally true that we are at times spiritually hungry. We feel a longing, a hope, a desire for that which we have not yet been able to grasp. And hunger inevitably and always has its effect. We see 2 different kinds of hunger in the reading. The people and Moses, didn't have his private stash of pork loin or lamb chops or anything like that. He was just as hungry as all the other people. But the people are complaining. I can only imagine and guess that you have had times in your life, maybe a day here or there, maybe a period of life, where you were hungry. You forgot to eat. Some people, believe it or not, can forget to eat. They're busy, and some people just think that way. They forget. We get hungry because we didn't eat enough, or we forget to eat, or we didn't have time to eat. But consider the weight of the kind of hunger of these Israelites traveling in the desert. You can tell by their imaginations, if nothing else. It sounds kind of good, doesn't it? We remember the fish we ate with the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic, and without cost, too. I don't remember the actor characters, but you have probably seen, it's been on for a while, the Snickers commercial. You've not seen that. They have the big size Snickers. That's got like 500 calories in it. Let's have a couple. Well, that happens. It's like, hey, you need a Snickers because we get out of sorts. So the people are literally feeling hunger. But we know also they're feeling a spiritual hunger. They're feeling a longing for God and a feeling of and a desire for God's providence. Moses, I think, not only feeling the physical hunger of poor food or an absence of food, although those coriander seeds, flakes that were turned into cakes made with oil, that sounds pretty good to me when I'm hungry. But if that's what you're eating for 6 months or a year or 5 years at a time, not so much. It seems to me that Moses is hungry of heart. He's longing and desiring. He's pleading for the providence of God. He's stressed. He's feeling the weight of leadership and pastoring. Notice the words that are used. Why do you treat your servant so badly? Moses is referring to himself. Was it I who conceived all this people? Or was it I that gave them birth? And it is you who told me to carry them at my bosom, like a foster father carrying an infant. In other words, you lead these people with love, with compassion. You're just not just the foreman to make sure the project gets done. I want you to do this with love. So maybe it's the weight of his compassion, his care. He sees and he hears, unpleasantly, the whining of the people. He wants to feed them. He says, where am I going to get meat for all these people? And by the way, I'd like some myself. That in itself is worthy of enough reflection for the day. What hungers do you have, and how do you satisfy them? Physical hunger, we all know what it's like to diet. The harder you try, sometimes the behinder you get. We know what's out there, but maybe today you probably noticed by the opening prayer, I think it's probably the first time in 40 years I've said the votive Mass for the hungry, for those in times of famine. I do pray almost daily for the people of the Sudan going through this terrible civil war. And various countries are trying to offer them humanitarian aid, but because of the war, the food's not getting through. The trucks aren't let through, and the food is either destroyed or stolen. They're starving literally to death. It's a worthy prayer, and it's a worthy reflection. All of us probably already know what we're having for breakfast if we haven't had it. We know what we're going to have for lunch, and we've got planning for dinner because it's already in the fridge or the freezer. It's a worthy prayer. Notice, too, as Jesus pastors the disciples and the people, he, too, has his own struggles. He's longing for comfort and consolation. He's hungry for the peace and the consolation of his Father's love. He's trying to go off to a quiet and a deserted place and reflect on the death of his cousin John the Baptist. But again, having the spiritual food and the spiritual strength of his Father's care and love, he sees the crowd and has compassion for them. He first serves their needs. And then he goes off later in the evening. No, you don't have to dismiss these people. You give them something to eat yourselves. Clearly, Jesus fed their spirits. He healed their bodies. He inspired them with hope and some kind of promise. That is a real kind of food. But then knowing, interestingly, the disciples, too, have a certain degree of compassion. Hey, it's been a long day for everybody. These folks got to be getting tired or hungry. Send them to nearby towns, and they can get themselves some food. No, you do it. Great challenge, is it not? In a moment, we'll approach the table of the Lord, the food of the living bread. Many themes. Pick one, ponder it today. How are you hungry, and how do you satisfy that hunger? Jesus, direct our minds, our hearts, and our stomachs to you.